has a fairly wide reach, FYI.
Yeah.
Anyway, good morning, everyone. BritSimon here, and as you can see, I'm here with Jessie Bless, the wonderful Jessie Bless. Jessie, I very much appreciate you taking some time today on your Sunday to spend some time talking about this. I hope you're going to plan something fun with the family for tomorrow for Veterans Day. But anyway, let's take a few minutes to talk about the issue. So people will probably know about me. I'm no fan of Trump, but Trump is now going to be the president on January the 20th, 2025. There's no doubt about that. And in that Trump administration world, we as Americans, I'm sure, want to support him in every way we can. However, there are going to be some grim realities when it comes to immigration. And so we need to prepare. The title, Jessie, of this video was how to prepare for a Trump administration, because I think we need to prepare. Would you agree?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. And I was just actually in California in Monterey yesterday, so I
nice.
Kind of came back, and I know you're out there, so I did have.
So to be clear, you're an hour away from my house, and you didn't call me to buy me a beer. Like,
no, I should have. You know, I was speaking at a conference. I flew in Thursday. I spoke Thursday night. I took Friday, and I attended the conference, and I woke up at 3:30 in the morning and flew back home because. You know, I only raised the travel is because it took me away from the media streams and had the ability to kind of think about what I think people need to know, whether their diversity visa 2025 had just registered for 26, and you know, there's a couple things. If you are in 2025 now, I know that we had a visa bulletin that was recently introduced that was not great about numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hopeful that December, I mean, I put a recommendation that they advance numbers this administration while they have one bulletin left to do it, and they could. But, you know, I think we have to prepare by looking at, we have an open book test. We know what happened last time.
Right. You were the director of litigation at AILA during the Trump administration, right?
Well, you know, it's funny. So I was actually with the Department of Justice for the first 5 months of the Trump administration. So I was still an active litigator, and I left in May. So I was like, you know, I always joke, I was like one of the first people out of the swamp. And I joined AILA 2 years later, when that administration really kind of started to get its so-called groove to put the reins on immigration. And then they had the pandemic to really justify some of the things they did. But if you go back, and I think this will be a similar playbook, I think.
Yeah.
But they'll be quicker this time.
Yes.
They'll be far quicker than they were last time. Their focus was on criminals in the border, and they family separation, zero tolerance. That, I don't know if family separation is coming back, but zero tolerance is certainly coming back. And it's going to be, instead of stopping people coming in, which has already somewhat happened due to some policies that the Biden administration have enacted, it's going to be zero tolerance for people who are here and undocumented. And they're going to try to remove as many people as possible. They've been very open about that.
Right.
That's happening. Okay, so if they expend their resources there are a couple of ways that they could impact visa issuance. Okay, and there are going to be things that we've seen. They could enact an executive order on day one that stops all entry. 212F gives the president the authority to stop entry. Those proclamations, those visa bans, right? Now, we were able to secure victory and talk about that those proclamations don't mean that the State Department needs to stop processing, but they've never really bought into that. Judges have been forced to tell them over and over again that you still have to do your job to process visas, especially diversity visas. Right. But I think we need to prepare for those executive orders that will stop entry. So if you have a visa today, and you can, especially if you've been issued a diversity visa, don't wait. You just can't wait till January. You have to come now. If you get your interview between now and January, 15th, and you get your visa in your hand, you'd be foolish to wait. You at least got to come in, because I don't think the bans necessarily will apply to people with green cards. So, but it may apply to people who haven't activated, and that's an important point. When you get a visa at the embassy or consulate, you're not actually activated until you get. And I think, the other thing short term is, and we've talked about this, and we don't know what they're going to do with the visa bulletin in terms of making visas available. But if you have your ability to come in the United States on a non-immigrant visa so that you can apply for adjustment of status, I would highly recommend you do that, because you're going to take a large part of the problem away, meaning you won't have to get, number one, you won't have to get a visa appointment at the embassy or consulate. Number two, you won't have to have the ability to enter. You've already done that. Right. And the last thing I'll say, just long term, 2026. If he ends up wrestling control of the House and Senate, and really wants to force through immigration reform, I don't know if he'll be successful. But one of the things that will be on the chopping block will be the diversity visa program. Yeah. That category of immigrant visa will go away. Yeah. And
traded in for a merit-based
absolutely
system, probably. Yeah, and I think it was Marquez West in the chat was saying Trump's never talked about the diversity visa. That's untrue. He absolutely has. He said that he wanted to remove it. Stephen Miller, who is his sort of right-hand man on immigration, has consistently referred to the diversity visa lottery as something they want to remove, as well as the lottery on H-1B, etc. But
it's in the 2025 project too.
It's in the 25 project, exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, that's been a long-running conservative platform for
they don't like it. I mean, they don't like the diversity visa. Now, having said that, there is not consistent support for law change, as I understand it. Jesse, please, perhaps you could touch on this. I mean, it always seems to me very, very difficult to get any immigration reform through, because number one, it's a lot of work, right? You've got to look at the INA and sort of revise broad aspects to make anything like a coherent plan. It's got to be, you can't just tinker around and say, well, we're taking that out, we're taking this in, or we're putting this in. It has to be pretty broad, otherwise it's just going to be a mess. So it's, number one, it's a lot of work. I don't see them doing a lot of work, frankly. And number two, it's very hard to get consensus, even from one party or the other. Not everyone agrees on what's good ways of having immigration work and what's bad ways, etc. Would you agree with that? I mean,
I don't know what the stomach will be to pass comp immigration reform. I do think there's going to be immigration bills that are skinny bills.
Okay.
Border enforcement for sure. Okay. And again, it's really about trade-offs. I mean, I don't have a lot of faith in Congress and politicians in general, so I don't know what they would be willing to stomach. I mean, it's going to be incumbent upon those who support the program, who've lived the program, who've benefited from the diversity visa program, to call their congressmen and women and senators if that becomes a provision that's on the trading block. I'll trade you the rescission of diversity visas for a million more H-1Bs. I mean, he's the art of the deal, and I just think that if it comes down to a trade, we have to make sure that we have certain moderate senators and congressmen and women who that's just a bridge too far for them, and I hope it will be. But
Right.
it's, and I think it's really about understand. I mean, the difficulty with immigration is it's become such a trigger word, and people don't really understand exactly what it means. People hear it now. It's been used effectively to mean people who came in without permission or on parole, who are, clogging up the system, and but really immigration is, and I think even the president will understand this, that if he is successful in executing a tenth of what's in like the Project 2025 or Stephen Miller's plan, we will not have a recession. We'll have a depression.
Right.
We will literally have a depression.
Yeah.
And when you think about hospitality, which is your hotels, and not even getting into the white collar jobs and your skilled labor.
Right.
So again, I think my hope is he's learned. I don't know, or that he has people like Vivek and I think it's Ramaswamy. I can't even say
Ramaswamy.
Apologies, and Elon, who are not dummies when it comes to skilled labor and kind of what immigration really means positively. Right. There's positive immigration and negative immigration. Only people are talking about now is negative immigration.
Right.
And so, and diversity visas are positive, right? They're positive immigration.
Right. In lots of ways.
Yeah. I mean, and listen, if Stephen Miller gets his way, that horrible speech that he gave about American for Americans for Americans, it's like, we will not have an immigration system, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's very akin to sort of speech, and speech from the 30s about Germany is for Germans.
Right.
Is that sort of speech? Clearly, it was that. Yeah, very worrying.
And the other thing to think about is this, which is also, I really do believe Elon in some respects that, our media platforms like we're doing here and social media across the board is the new media. And it's going to be really, really important for people to get in touch and engaged with, shining a light on what is happening. And so, because I think the administration really is emboldened, but if approval ratings, they have a tricky way of going down sometimes after the honeymoon is over, and nobody wants to see a recession, depression, or I think a system where people are being targeted based on their ethnicity, race, country of origin, and what have you. I mean, and that is a bedrock of our immigration system. I mean, it's actually a provision in the Immigration and Nationality Act. You cannot discriminate based on someone's national origin. So, in the immigrant visa issuance. So, are they going to go after that and say that that's actually acceptable now? I hope not.
So let's talk about the mechanics of it a little bit. So, the travel ban, which was, going back. People may not understand the history. I mean, I have to remind myself sometimes that the original Trump conversations, about travel ban and that sort of thing happened from 2015. And many of the people going through the DV lottery right now were probably kids when those things were spoken, so they may not understand. So there were two Muslim terrorist attacks, Islamic terrorist attacks, in particular, that drove Trump to talk publicly about wanting to shut down immigration for Muslims, right? And his speech was something like, "I, Donald Trump, call for the complete and total shutdown of all Muslim movement into the country," something like that. And that was in 2015, December 2015. Then he reiterated it in June 2016 during the campaign. And then they produced a ban, which wasn't labeled the Muslim ban, but to all intents and purposes, that was the result of the rhetoric that Trump had been going through. he then, over a period of time, there were 3 iterations, I think, of that travel ban. The first one was struck down pretty quickly in February after it was introduced in January. But then there were 2 other iterations after that, and the third one was allowed to stay, and it focused on security, and it dealt with some countries in particular. And I put out in my video the other day a list of the countries that had been affected by that final ban. And so, he did get country specific. It was mainly directed against Muslim majority nations, but not all of them were Muslim majority. And some of them had sort of different things, like Chad, for example, where they just weren't cooperative. So he was trying to force cooperation as well as deal with security issues and give the red meat to his followers, which had listened to his Muslim ban rhetoric. So if he does that, and he'll do that by executive order, right? So he does that by executive order, probably day one, January 20th, 21st, let's say, and maybe it'll have a 7-day waiting period like the last one or whatever. So by the end of January, we'll probably have some sort of travel ban in place, and it will probably refer specifically to people from certain countries. So is that going to be, do you think there's someone out there preparing to attack such a ban legally, or will that just be allowed to stay in the same way that the final one was allowed to stay?
Yeah, I mean, not only was it allowed to stay, it was endorsed by the Supreme Court, which has only become more conservative. I mean, they had Trump v. Hawaii, which basically had said, the president has the authority to really blank check to stop the entry. I think the issue is, and we were successful, in Gomez, and there were other cases as well where the entry and visa issuance are 2 different things. Right. Plus, you also need to have a rational connection, which is not a lot, right? I think when we had lost on the issue of whether there was a rational connection to stop entry of immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas, that was part of the Gomez case. Because Judge Mehta said, well, there is COVID-19 and there is maybe a reason to do it. That was kind of the at the end where he started to get a little bit better about drafting. So I think they're going to be challenged. Yeah, I think they're going to be challenged because I think there's a lot of nonprofits who are energized and engaged and going to provide an important service to test and just really explain that that the rationale he's using to stop entry of all, even lawful immigrants and non-immigrants, is not, because I think the rationale would have to be, we have such a crisis in this country because of the prior administration's parole programs that allowed people to walk through our doors. Yeah, that we can't let even lawful immigrants and non-immigrants into this country.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that has to be the rationale. And then,
exactly. That's pretty much where I was going the other day, and I was suggesting that in addition to the countries that were previously banned from African and Asian nations, for example, he may sort of tack onto that a specific provision for some of the South American countries, such as Ecuador, Guatemala, etc., who have a legitimate reason for people to be moving north. Mm-hmm. An entry ban would kind of shut down that sort of immigration as well, along with other nationals that they've talked about during all of this fear-mongering they've been doing over the last 4 years with, taking pictures of people crossing at the border and whatever from various countries,
I think we have the situation where, like we had in Gomez with Mehta, where, for diversity visa individuals specifically, the clock runs out on September 30th. And now under the DC Circuit's opinion, judges can't reserve visas. So the issue then becomes, if you're going to target this, and for diversity visas, I think that's I think the most, I mean, again, it's tough to, I don't want to rank and prioritize. So I'll let the
No, but for this video, that's the most
but for those who are in 2025's queue, clock runs out. No one's gonna change the clock. No one's gonna do that. So you have to be prepared to file your case in February and get an injunction that carves out an exception for diversity visas for 2025. You're gonna have to do that. Not and have a judge monitor the processing such that they handle it, because you're going to need a team that understands the diversity visa program in and out, because what's really important is to understand that you can enforce immigration laws. You have component agencies that do that, but that has nothing to do with visa processing at an embassy. Right. And I mean, unless you're going to tell me that they're shifting all CBP officers from airports to go track down people within our country's borders.
Right.
You really, what is the rationale behind ending the program? And even Judge Mehta himself had said, in that Gomez case, you cannot just shut down immigration system.
Right.
So Congress allocates, visas per annum every year. Diversity visa happens to be, I think, the only category where, your eligibility ends. At the end of the year. I mean, you can, so there is no waiting for the crisis to pass. You're either in or you're out. Again, they're the best, the group to litigate, but to be honest, I'm not sitting here like confident about the litigation. I think that like we're preparing for, and I'm not preparing. I'm just preparing the public that, do I think it's going to be necessary? Yeah, I do. I think that's going to be your only chance. I don't think, because a judge. So the other part is this. Let's say they have a rationale, and a judge says, I do see that there's a crisis. We've let in X number of people. I'll allow you to bar the entry. And I think the litigation will shift to, well, how long does the presidential power, exist for? How long can he do that? Can he shut it down for 2 years? He may try.
And depending on how they craft it, let's not give them any clues, but depending on how they craft it, whatever crisis they say is the need for the ban, they can build their own metric about when that crisis can be perceived to have ended, right? So, well, we've still got illegals in this country. That could be the crisis, right? But
and I think So I mean, again, there's going to be. Look, are we going to get help from Congress? Unlikely. So if we look at like our three branches of government, is Congress coming to the rescue? No.
No.
President coming to the rescue? That's a hell no. And so courts become that third branch, and we're facing a stiff challenge. But I do believe there are going to be advocates who are going to take the lead. As we've seen, though, again, this is maybe getting a little too nerdy about the litigation. I don't know if there will be a class action, which covers everybody in a certain class, or I don't know if you'll have to file for yourself, or I don't know, you have to be very, for those of you out there who are in the program, you've taken the steps, you've done all that you can do, you've done a DS-260, you're waiting. Whether you join a lawsuit or you become a member of a class is very important, and we should talk about that. So if there's a class action, you are going to essentially be a free ride. Right? You don't have to be named as a plaintiff. You don't have to sign up. If they win, you win. I don't know if there'll be any class actions, simply because a nonprofit has to be almost willing, like we did, to do the work without taking a legal fee.
Yeah.
Most lawyers, like myself in private practice, have to.
And it's, as we've seen, that went on for years, hugely expensive litigation
Yeah.
For the lawyers that kindly signed up for that. I mean, that
was so then you have the group. Do you join a group of like-minded people? Maybe it's all DV people who were who had visas current on January 20th. Or do you do your own case and say, I did everything I could do. I deserve to at least have a visa issued, and in fact, should be allowed have an exception.
Can I just sort of separate this into two different parts then, Jesse? I'd like to talk about the individual mitigation strategies that individuals could choose to do.
Yeah.
Right? And I'd like to talk, just sort of make sure we've sort of explained the big picture in terms of the overall thing, right? So if I may, just a couple of sort of quick fire questions that I get all the time, right? So the travel ban is likely to come in very early on in the presidency. It's likely to affect certain countries just based on what we saw before. It shouldn't affect green card holders, but it will affect almost certainly people who are holding an immigrant visa but have not yet entered. So on those grounds, people need to move their asses to get into the country as quickly as possible, ideally before January 20th, if possible. The next thing that would be talked about, or questions I get, is can Trump end the DV program? And my answer is normally that requires immigration law change of the type we talked about earlier. And that's not going to be a quick thing. That's not going to be overnight. But he can do some quicker things, perhaps to slow the processes down. Just at sort of a macro level, he could basically introduce, for example, more screening. So we had the DS 5535 that came in during the Trump presidency. He could do more of that sort of screening and slow the whole process down, right? He could go for, or other people could go for, immigration changes. To your point about the skinny bills focusing on just one thing, a bit of horse trading. But then when we come back to individual mitigation strategies, let's just talk through them. You've already mentioned AOS, right? Adjustment of status. So that would be a big benefit to some people now to think about whether they can get a visa. I don't know whether people can still get a visa between now and January 20th, but if they could enter into the USA before January 20th on a legitimate visa, not on ESTA, right, then they may be able to adjust status while in the USA. And we might see the visa bulletin moving quite fast. You made a comment about it earlier, but we might see that because in a world where lots of people are banned, they may as well move the visa bulletin numbers high. They could even go current quite quickly, right? If they were inclined to do that. And right. I don't know whether Trump will have his finger on that particular button or not. But so people should enter if they can, and they have a legitimate way of entering and supporting themselves, etc. They should look into that. But then you also touched on group lawsuits and individual lawsuits. So I assume you're talking about sort of mandamus type lawsuits. Is that correct? Could you explain a little bit about how those could work?
Well, yeah. So, I think as everybody, we've said it before. I mean, diversity visas have a time to expiration. September 30th, 2025 is going to be the last day that anyone can get a visa. And you actually can, and if you got your visa on that date and it was valid for 6 months, you could actually enter. You don't have to. You don't have to enter, right? You have 6 months, right?
6 months, yeah.
Yeah. So you just have to get
6 months after the medical. So
right. So, yeah. So you just have to get the visa. So they have to issue you the visas by September 30th.
Yeah, we still get entries up to sort of March or so of the following year.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. All right. So now mandamus are very, very, very difficult, but that would be for delay. When you hear mandamus, it's just it's a phrase that just means delay. You're delaying my case. You're delaying my case. There's also
unreasonable delay. Is that
there's also
conversation about unreasonable, right?
Yeah, it has to be unreasonable. I think most diversity visa lawsuits in the last couple of years on mandamus have not succeeded because they've been hitting the cap, right? And if you're hitting the cap and you're not guaranteed a diversity visa. Nobody is. You're not even guaranteed an interview.
Right.
You're not even guaranteed processing if you're put in admin processing. And so the unreasonable delay cases that had been successful, 1920, maybe part of 2021, have not really been successful because you can't say they're delaying if they're hitting the cap. It's been really hard for a judge to see it that way, and it hasn't worked. I think there's also, though, what we may find ourselves with, there's a related claim called unlawful withholding. And if they were to end the diversity visa program, I do believe there's an argument to be made, and one that we had some success with, that it would be an unlawful withholding, because they would just be freezing you out. They would just freeze. They know that, you know, and so,
yeah. So can I just clarify? Sorry, keep that point. I want to come back to it.
Yeah.
When you say they would end the DV program, they can't end the program, but they can end the activities.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and for 2025, they would end, you know, like, as you mentioned, they may do any and all of what we talked about. They could put a ban on entry. They could require extreme vetting of all diversity visa applicants,
which would create a huge 221G backlog, which is the same thing in effect, right?
Right. I mean, you know, it's kind of, you know, for our friends from Iran, China, and Russia who have to deal with this, and others, you know, it's often, you know, it happens in the student visa context a lot, where you get a 5535 and it's 18 to 24 months.
Right.
And we don't have that.
No.
So now, should they be cognizant of the deadline? Yes, of course they should. Is it unreasonable if they're not? That's really a question for the judge, and it's really, really hard. The other thing is, when you're dealing with litigation where you have an expiration date, and especially now after the Good Luck decision, you're going to need an injunction. You're going to need a judge to make a ruling very quickly. And it's an expensive endeavor. And that is not even a question. So, you know, and I know a lot of people are saying it costs a ton of money just to get through the process in a regular way. Now I got to go out and engage. And I'm not telling anybody to do that. I'm telling everyone the facts, so you're equipped with the information. So maybe we're just fear mongering and it never comes to pass and they hit the cap this year. But if not, you know, litigation is not something that is cheap, just simply because if you need a preliminary injunction, you're talking about compressing a case that would take maybe a year into a case that takes 45 days, maybe even less.
Right.
And it requires a lot of work for a legal team. You know, there was a similar case that the states just brought against this parole in place or family unity program that was successful, right? And it's almost like we need to do the opposite. Probably. You know, there's instead of family unity, it's going to be family separation. And is that okay? I hope not. You know, but the other thing for people to understand is, you know, judges are supposed to be unbiased and objective, but my experience tells me that they're human beings first. Right. Human beings with bias. So, you know, again, if I had one message to people who are in the program, you have to go look at your number. If you're waiting on a DS-260, if you haven't done it, my goodness, do it. If you're current, I would almost look like January 20th is an expiration date. Yeah. And if you can get your visa before then, or you can get in the U.S. and file for adjustment of status, and I know the numbers are low, but we're going to get a bulletin probably this week, maybe.
Yeah, it'll be this week.
We got to.
Here's the bulletin that will affect January DV interviews, right? So and they kept the numbers, as you mentioned earlier. They kept the numbers pretty much the same for the first 3 months of the program, partly because they started very high, but they just came straight out. They, you know, month one with 15,000 for Africa, for example, which was unjustifiably high for that month. But so then month two, it was repeated. Okay, that probably makes sense. Month three, it was repeated. That's kind of like, that's weird. Now that's getting a bit weird, you know. But yeah, I'm hoping to see a bit of an increase on the numbers because that will be January interviews.
It also allows people to file for adjustment of status.
Precisely. You know? And also when they did a retrogression in, I think it was 2017 or 2018 on DV case numbers. People that were scheduled were allowed to continue, even though the VB had moved back under their case numbers. So, you know, we've seen how that can operate. So yes, I mean, to your point, a big VB increase this week would be very, very good. To start off those cases.
Yeah, we need it. And in fact, there's nothing that would say that they can't do it. I think, I'm not going to sit here and kick them when they're down, but, you know, I look at that family unity program and I look at a couple other things that they've done, and there are opportunities missed for sure to have a balanced immigration system. And the one good thing I will celebrate is, you know, here's another one. They did not have to keep fighting us in Gomez, and good luck.
Right.
And we lost 9,100 visas at least, not even counting Curtis's and the other ones, and Chuck's, you know. And that I'll never have. I'll never be able to forgive, I guess, myself for that, but also the administration. That was just such a costly. It was just unnecessary. And but the one good part of that whole case was they never said that Judge Mehta was wrong about that stopping that program.
Right.
And they almost had a better. I mean, to be completely candid, I think, like, you know, the fallout from the pandemic, if there was ever a reason to stop an entry, I guess a pandemic would be a pretty good one. I think stopping entry because you don't like how many people came in through a program, you know, or that are seeking protection. I don't know if a federal judge will see that, because it's not as if we're in a recession or depression, right? We don't like that. We don't like the cost of bacon. Right. So are high egg prices enough with a 4% unemployment rate to stop our immigration system from flowing and against the will of Congress? I don't know. I think there's a lot of smart attorneys who are going to make a compelling case to say that is not rational. That's not right. Don't tell me you just ran on making government efficient. Now you're saying you can't do two things at once. You can't enforce the border and allow visa officers to process visas. Come on.
Right.
You know? So I don't know. I mean, again, I hope. The thing is, I hope is actually, I should just stop there and tell everyone that's something you should not do.
Right.
If you're out there now and you have a diversity visa application in the queue, hope is a wrong strategy.
Yeah.
You need to grab your case by the horns. You know, I know there are people sometimes that will just like reschedule, like things like that. There is no time for that. If you don't have your vaccinations, I mean, actually they may go away, but until they don't. I mean, you have to be on top of your certificates. You know, if you're one of those that are looking at a high school equivalency. Don't wait till the interview. You got to prepare all of the things that come up at these interviews. There can be no second looks.
No, exactly. Some people will unavoidably be put on 221G for, you know, and there's no way they can avoid it. But there are far too many people who go to the interview underprepared and then get 221G. And once they're on 221G, the CO could say, you know what, while we're at it, we'll do a DS 5535, and then you're looking at 2 or 3 months at least of delay, and much more than that if you're from Muslim-controlled country.
One other thing, you know, just because I don't, you know, newsflash, diversity visas actually are something I rarely touch nowadays, unless it's an adjustment of status case, and, you know, I don't litigate them anymore, or I haven't. But I think what people need to understand, because we get so hyper-focused on diversity visas, if that's our story, if that's what we're doing. But you have to understand that there are so many other categories of people competing for a visa appointment.
Yeah.
And now, this conversation about the visitor visas, if you turned on YouTube channel 3, they're going to have a conversation about L1 executive or managers who have to get their visas by January 20th. So everybody is going to be competing.
Yeah.
So that I really do think that in the grand scheme of things, anyone who doesn't try to adjust status is making a giant mistake. I mean, I cannot say that. I mean, I know we already had a video on that, but I mean, to me, And why do I say that? USCIS is incredibly great about processing diversity visa applications for adjustment of status. And I don't think those career officials are going to be kicked out of the swamp on day one. And I think if you file and you pay for your fee, you pay a fee, which is a very high fee, it's expensive, you're paying to get your case processed. And I think a judge will enforce that
Right.
you deserve an opportunity that you paid for.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have this kind of crazy way of thinking about immigration, where if you show up at an embassy, you have no rights. If you're in the U.S., you have many more.
Right.
So
yeah. The other thing about adjustment of status, with the early filing policy, we're in November now. So with the early filing policy, before January the 20th, people will be able to file for cases that become current in March, right?
Yeah.
So, that's not just this month's cases as we are for consular processing.
Yeah.
But yeah, someone could enter in the last few months of this year, preferably by the end of December, let's say. And if their number becomes current for March, that'll be in the January published visa bulletin, which is called the February visa bulletin, but that will affect March numbers, and you can immediately file. So you can get your filing in before January 20th.
And I don't know what you think, but I mean, that should be roughly enough for about half the allocation, right? Don't you think, by March?
Half the allocation, but it will only be a smallish percentage. We had about 1,300 cases went through AOS in DV24, and that's about average, maybe a little on the high side. So not many people avail themselves of those sorts of that route, but really more should. Yeah. I absolutely agree. That would be the safest route.
Well, the other thing, I'll just make this point for those thinking of doing it. It's a little bit more intensive than a DS-260 and then submitting documents. It takes time, and you have to get your biometrics taken, and you have to do medicals, and you have to mail them in or bring them with you. And I don't want to mean like USCIS is perfect. So if you're thinking of filing, you want to think at least a month or two ahead of time and have your application either prepared for you, or you prepare it with all the documents you need. And every family member needs his or her own, they call it an I-485. Right. You have to do it. But it's not something, we had this last year, we were trying to do it. I mean, the fastest I could do it is a week, right. And we had that for people who were really pressing up against the deadline last year. You don't want to put yourself, so if we're preparing for this next administration and you're thinking of an adjustment of status application, I mean, I'm not saying go pay for an attorney if you don't know if your number is going to be current, but you can actually take a look at USCIS's website to get a list of what documents you need. A lot of them are similar. Print out the DS-260 that you have in your possession, because that's very helpful, especially if you're going to use it. It's helpful for me to print it out and have copies of it for yourself. Yeah. If you don't know where you're going to be living, or start to prepare for that life.
No, that's good. So individual mitigation strategies, then AOS is a big deal. Adjustment of status is a big deal, and it can be self-done. You don't necessarily have to use a lawyer. Having a lawyer in your corner fighting for you is sometimes a useful thing, and I certainly highly recommended that last year towards the end of the year, because people were having to enter fairly late, and I didn't want people to make mistakes, which is why I was really calling for people to contact you. But yeah, some people can. Well, if people are pretty good with paperwork, they can do their own I-485s, and there is a publicly available list of all the documents you need, etc., and all the prep steps you have to go through. So it is possible. I did my own. It is possible. So AOS is one way. If you get a visa before January 20th, get on a plane. Please just don't delay. Just, don't gamble on, I don't think my country will be banned. The ban could be clumsy to start with. Clumsy meaning they'll try and create a big splash, a big sort of splash of information in the media to say, oh, look what we did. We banned all the entries just like we promised you we would. Even if that's then taken down over the subsequent months, it's going to create a delay and a backlog. So don't rely on that. And there were people in the original bans who had immigrant visas and were not able to enter. And so they completely lost their chance. We were never able to fix that problem.
And there are people, there's always a couple each year, and it just drives us crazy. I mean, there are people who get the visas and don't enter.
Right.
Like, and here's the other thing for those. When you enter, you can leave, but you're leaving as a green card holder or a lawful permanent resident with all the rights that entails you, which is everything you fought for. So that if you had to leave and go home for 6 months or whatever, I wouldn't wait more than 6 months. Sometimes
I was going to ask you.
You could theoretically come back. I mean, if he bans the reentry of lawful permanent residents, he's not going to be able to strip them of that status because they can't get. I mean, I don't think he'll do that. I don't think that'll pass. But
did you see the denaturalization office tweet from Stephen Miller?
Yeah, but I mean, they tried that, and a lot of honestly, my former colleagues, they ramped up that office. You know how hard it is to denat them, and they lost. And here's the other thing, and this is kind of maybe me talking to you as like, what do I, am I afraid? What do I think? Listen, they're saying a couple things that are not going to work. If they want to strip the government and of the workforce of government officers, you're talking about all the officers you need to run the immigration system. So, meaning those that have to go and get the boogeyman out there that you think.
Yes.
And so, how again, I'll believe it when I see it. And the other thing too is if you take away the people who are processing valid, the people who work at Tesla or SpaceX, maybe, the CEO of that company you may have heard of. If you stop that, you really will have a depression. So they're not going to be able to do what they're telling people. Do I think they're going to go after people who are undocumented? Absolutely, 100%. Do I think people who we really haven't had a functioning removal system since 2014. To say that it was functioning is ridiculous, but we have, just so everyone can understand, to be removed in this country if you were present in the United States, and I'm not talking about getting caught at the border, but you're here but you don't have papers, you actually have to go before a judge, and you have appeal rights, and you actually have appeal rights after that. And we have, talk about an imbalance of supply and demand. Trump will be long gone of this earth before that removal process, unless they are going to hire 5,000 immigration judges. It's just, and which they're not.
Right.
Because there aren't 5,000 people in this country who could be an immigration judge. Right. They're just, it's an extremely hard job. So again, I'm not so sure that they're going to be able, they may find that it's easier to let the system run for immigration the way it's supposed to, and at the same time dedicate resources to the enforcement side of it. But if they do that, I think that we have a chance for diversity visas to run, because I think singling them out, I think that'll be a red herring for a judge.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Remember when they did that deprioritization? Yeah. They had the COVID, and judges were like, why are you putting them at the bottom? It doesn't,
doesn't make sense. But we still have some of those effects lingering. That's the thing. It's not so much the technicalities of what they can do. Like, can they stop the DV program? No, not without law change. But can they make it bloody hard? Yes, they can, quite easily. And what you were just saying about, stripping the government of its manual, of its workforce. Yes, that would mean that it would cause chaos, but chaos is kind of what they want, because chaos would create the backlogs, and it would be, throwing a spanner in the bicycle wheel. Just break the whole bloody thing for a while and then fix it for Elon.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, again, um, and I talk to immigration attorneys, the public, talking to you. I think, we're going to find out what we're all made of. And because you find out what you're made of when things get hard. When it's easy, when you're on easy street, that's not so it's a test of everybody. Things are going to be hard. It's going to be hard. And no question. If you're in the immigration system, if you want to get in the immigration system, if you want to fix the immigration system, you better roll up your sleeves and be able to outwork everyone else.
Right.
And there are a lot of people, applicants, attorneys, judges, who don't like the hard work.
Right.
And we're about to find out who really wants to work hard and really who doesn't. And I think for anyone out there who's part of the DV 2025, I mean, I've seen people in 2021, 22 who found a way. So if there's a way, it's incumbent upon you to find it and go get it. Because if you wait for someone else to do it, or wait for someone to help you, unless you're paying that person, you're not going to get it. I mean, you'll get good help from Simon. God bless him. He at least sits there and dedicates his time for y'all. But I think that could mean transferring your case to the extent that's still available, showing up with the correct paperwork, hiring the right person, someone you trust, not making mistakes, simple mistakes, not showing up to an interview if you know you're ineligible.
Yeah.
I mean, so, again, I'm not going to sit here and think about 26 and 27 and immigration reform. I think there's enough good people who believe in our immigration system and believe in the diversity visa program who that would probably be a bridge too far. Yeah. That's not the fabric of our country.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So
very worrying times, but I don't. When the election went the way it did the other day, I just took a sort of day or two out and just sort of mentally adjusted, and I didn't want to sit around sort of moping or whatever. And so I'm kind of pleased with what happened in a sense, looking back, because there's two things that come to mind about the Biden administration, being over and moving into the Trump administration. The fact that Trump won means there isn't going to be insurrection bullshit going on, because the other side will just deal with it. So I don't have to go and buy a gun and to defend myself. And second, we now get to see whether Trump can make good on all the promises he's made. He's made a ton of promises and a ton of threats. And, so now his followers expect all that stuff will just magically occur. And to your point, I don't think he'll be able to do much of it. I mean, they're not going to be deporting 10 million plus people. It's just not going to happen. But there will be some horrible, horrible cases. So, so for the DV lottery folks, just, you've got to do your own, whatever you can in your own best interest, whether that's coming into the country to prepare for an adjustment of status, whether it's making sure you go prepared to an interview, whether it's talking to, myself, or, perhaps having a call with Jesse or whatever it might be. I've put Jesse's website link, by the way, below the video, so that you can schedule a consultation if you need to with Jesse, if you're worried about particular legal aspects. I'm sure Jesse won't mind, taking some of those calls. But we'll have to, apart from that, we just have to wait and see what will happen. And hopefully just, pray, if you want to pray, it's not going to be as bad as we might fear. Let's hope it's not that bad. I think in some ways it will probably be worse than we fear, or worse than we understand. But in general, we'll get through it.
I think it's going to be difficult, right? And I think, and it was kind of like my message to a lot of my colleagues. You're going to find out what you're made of. And I think for my clients and for those in the public, you're going to find out what you're made of too. Wishing and hoping and lamenting are not going to get us anywhere. So, do I think we're going to beat Trump in court 70% of the time like we did in the last administration? No, I think our stats will go down, but I don't really believe in stats. I tell my clients, the questions we get are, what are my chances? How often do you win? I always say, like, I have to win one. I have to win your case.
Right.
Right. My stats don't mean it. It's like, is Milan gonna, win the whatever cup they're going? Who knows? They're gonna win the game ahead of them, and that's how you have to think about. I think a lot of people get stuck thinking about this number and that number in this country. You have to just get a hold of your case and own it. Yeah. Own your own case now. So don't be, again, the way we're going to get through this is not by holding our head down. It's by holding our head up and just fighting. I mean, just doing what we can. And the other thing is this. Our immigration system has always been flexible and defeated those that have tried to break it. Now, the system itself is in dire need of reform, but it has still brought in some of the best people in the world, like you. I mean, right? So, that's a system we have, and we're going to hold on to it and use it. Yeah. And I think judges will not allow one branch of government to stop the system.
Right.
And if I'm wrong, then we really have a monarchy.
Yeah, I think you're right. And even people like Vivek and Elon Musk and Kennedy perhaps will be talking about population decreases and how much of a threat that would be to America. I mean, America needs immigration, really does need it.
I mean, look at. I mean, Vivek is second generation. JD Vance married second generation, I believe. I don't know if she's from India. Trump, his immigration story. Elon is first generation. He brought his mom. So they've lived it and they've done it. I mean, to the extent they followed the rules. I don't know if Elon did, but I know the rest of them did.
Right.
So that's, I think, if I were a head of a nonprofit or had a position of power to talk as a person to that administration, what I would say is, I agree with you. Let's follow the rules, right? Let's go back to following the rules. Diversity visa program, they have to follow so many damn rules. They're the best rule followers we have.
Right.
They have to get selected. They have to do a DS-260. They have to go for an interview. Then they have to get their asses in here. Like, they're the rule followers, right? So I'm all for a rule of law, follow it, fine, do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they have to be reminded of if they start disrupting the rules, because they're no better than the people they're complaining of. And that is how you need. And I don't know if we have the voice yet on the other side. It's not going to be Liz Warren. It's not, because they drowned her out. It almost has to be a moderate Republican who maybe lives in a community that has seen the benefits of, I don't know, a farm country or maybe North Carolina, maybe, or somewhere where immigrants have really turned around their economy and are critical for it. To just examine and explain how following the rules for our immigration system has led to this tremendous ability and vibrancy of our economy, which is the best in the world. And whether we like it or not right now, it is.
Right.
And so we support the rule of law. We're with you on that. We're with you on that. Let's do that together. But you start, ending our system. That's rule breaking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Jesse, you got a. I know you got a previous engagement, right? You had till 2.
I have until 2. Yeah, I have to.
You're 2 minutes past.
I have to drive my children to practice. Is what I got.
All right. So I don't want to take you away from your family, and get people grumpy with you. I think what I'm going to do is I'll probably stay on live and answer some of the questions that have come in. Just take a stab at some of those. But more than happy if you need to drop, as I think you probably do. More than happy to
And I think what we should maybe do is commit to maybe coming back. I mean, at least I'll commit to coming back, because we're going to learn a lot more. This was just a primer of things, and then, as the program runs, and the administration comes in, and we see who the attorney general is, we see who the DHS secretary is, and things like that, because they're going to refill all those. Who's the secretary of state? Certainly not going to be Blinken.
Yeah. No, I mean, there could be, if the AG is Stephen Miller, for example, we're in, the choices they're about to make for the administration will be quite important to us, right?
Yeah, that guy Homan's going to have a big role.
Oh my God,
internally.
Oh my gosh, Homan, I mean, not the brightest spark, but clearly happy to do whatever.
I mean, you tend to. I'll tell you though, maybe I hope I'm just not getting old, but there is a funny way where karma or religion, or whatever you believe in, the goodness kind of finds a way to do the right thing. I mean, that's just the way life works. I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to get religious on people, but so that's what I'm going with. I mean, they can point whoever they want, and Miller, good luck, bud. I've seen him before. I know who you are. Oh, Ken Cuccinelli. Let's go all day. Let's go. Has he learned how to write a reg in 4 years, or can they actually confirm people at DHS? We're going to find out, because they didn't know the first time.
Yeah, but I mean, they'll probably come in, hitting the ground running. I mean, Trump himself, he's got one more administration, and he knows he's only got 4 years. Nothing he can do. He's got to hit the ground running.
I've hit this drum, and I'm going to hit it until the day is long.
Oh God, you're not going to say he's going to extend?
No. Oh. God, no. I don't think this country will go for that. We don't. He just ran on following the rule, like that's the kind of thing. No, I will say this: Trump, they care. He cares about his approval ratings in the economy.
Yeah.
1 and 2.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that. And if he does what he wants to do, if he does what Stephen Miller wants to do to immigration, we will have a depression. He will have the lowest approval ratings of any president of all time, and he will leave in disgrace.
Right.
So again, if that's what you want, go get it, bud. Because it won't last for long. It won't last for long, because he'll end up turning on Miller, Homan, Elon, Vivek. Listen, he's like the lead singer in a band. There can only be one.
Right?
And he could be Elton John playing his little piano at the corner by the end of this. So again, economy and approval ratings, those require a vibrant immigration system.
Right.
He may think different, but he's going to learn that I'm right. So all right, sir. I'm out.
All right, Jesse. Lovely to see you. Thanks for spending the time with us. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, Jesse.
Bye.
Okay, so there you have it. Jesse is absolutely an expert in the area of immigration law. He's been a practicing lawyer for many years. He worked with Ada in a senior role, and Jesse was one of the key figures in the DV 2020 and DV 2021 lawsuits, which actually did win and did achieve a lot of benefit for people. But unfortunately, there was one particular aspect, which was the reservation of visas after the end of the fiscal year. That piece of it was shut down later on appeal by the government. And so, we did get several thousand, about 6,000 extra visas through in DV 2020, for example, because of the work that Jesse and others had put in. So, I'm prepared to take a few minutes more and take some questions here. It would help me a lot if you've asked a question that hasn't been answered in this live session already, and you want to ask that question now. If you want to put that in the chat now, I'll start working down just the last few minutes of questions. And so if you did ask a question earlier on while I was speaking with Jesse, then ask it again. Repeat it, and and let's just answer some of those outstanding questions if there are any. Yannick, to Jesse, you're perfectly correct, Jesse. I'm glad participating. Bring you the best. Oh, thanks for that. Let's see. Question here. My parents won a green card, and they went for an interview, and they were approved. And I was fined ineligible for visa because I was over 21 years old. In future visa application, is this a case of visa refusal? No, because you weren't entitled to the visa. It's not like you were adjudicated or refused on some sort of grounds. You were simply not entitled. I hope you did take advantage of the protection for for children. Hopefully you built in the extra few months that you get about 6 months extra, but you were clearly above that, I would imagine. So so let's say, if a bill to eliminate or proclaim the DV lottery would that affect DV 26 or 27? Okay, Samir. So obviously, as we sit today, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, right? What you're asking me to predict is not only if they introduce law that takes down the DV lottery, right? If that law were to pass and when that law were to pass, right? And that's very difficult for me to predict all of those things. So difficult that I'm not even going to try. What I'll explain to you is this. DV 2026 is sort of already running, right? We've just had the DV 26 entry period end. The results will be out in May. If there is no DV lottery change in the law before May, the announcement of the results will be a good thing. That sort of strengthens the position of DV 2026 being allowed to continue. Then on the 1st of October of next year, it will have begun, right? I don't think they're going to stop any DV lottery year in the middle of the year from a legal point of view. I think they might slow it down, and I think they might throw barriers in the way of it, but I don't think they will have a law, and I mean a law, that's introduced that says we're stopping the DV lottery tomorrow, right? I think any law that comes in will be sort of reasoned through and will have like a sunset provision. Curtis Morrison recently sent me some information which he had seen from a freedom of information request that talks about exactly that. That the Office of Consular Affairs, part of the Department of State, supported a closure of the DV program, hopefully with a sunset provision, meaning, at the end of this year's lottery, then it will, when that one ends, there'll be no further lotteries beyond that, right? That's an organized way to end the lottery. Would that happen? When will that happen? I don't know, right? But it's not going to stop. There's going to be no legal process, that goes through fast enough and results in the DV lottery being stopped like the next day or the end of that month. It'll be, okay, we're not going to do future DV lotteries. So there's going to be time. There'll be time to sort of, deal with that. But my gut reaction is I don't see DV lottery being stopped for quite some time to come, if at all, frankly. I don't think this administration is going to be that good to actually bring in new laws. So it's just a guess, right? But we can apply some common sense to the logic there. I have valid DV pottery. You got DV pottery until 23rd of February 2025. I'm planning to travel on December 24th. That's fine. No issue with that, Bassem. Yeah, that's a good plan. I should have asked, and I probably will ask, just so you know, new entries coming in. You can enter and immediately leave. Like, there is no minimum time that you need to be in the USA. So when you enter on your first entry, that's when you become a lawful permanent resident. So when you come in, Bassem, on December 24th, you will become an LPR, a lawful permanent resident, on that day. If you want to, you can get on the next plane and leave the country straight away. No problem at all. You can then be absent for up to 6 months at a time, and have very little concern about being able to get in. You can also be absent between 6 and 12 months. and you're technically still able to get in, but you're reapplying for admission, and so the lawyers generally encourage people to stick below the 6 months. And frankly, under the Trump administration, I think that advice is going to become more logical. So my normal advice is you can leave for up to 12 months. Under a Trump administration, I would say at this point, speaking today, try and consider your absences from America of being up to 6 months, no longer than that. And I'm not talking about from when you got the visa to when you leave. I'm talking about the period of time you're absent, right? On any particular trip, you can leave between this day and that day. That period of time should be within 6 months. Hey, look, I'm doing the Trump thing. I'm doing that, right? You see, he's causing change already. Anyway, so yeah, just be aware of that, okay? If DV lottery is affected under Trump Immigration Law Act, how likely will it? Same question I just answered. Why in Kenya there are no 2NLs for Nairobi? I don't know. And I don't know that that's even true, right? So I don't know. Joe, you're in America? Yeah, thank you, Brit. Just arriving in the US. POE was good and waiting for the social security card now. Brilliant. Welcome, Joe. You're not silly. You just asked a couple of interesting questions, right? You're not silly, Joe. Does Iranian person with about 10K case number has a chance? There's no doubt about it. Iranians are going to have an even worse time of it in the future. I presume you all know that there was a plot, which was discovered to assassinate Trump. And it was a sponsored plot by the Iranian government, right? How the F do you think that's going to work out for Iran? Trump is not going to be happy. He had 2 or 3 assassination plots against him. People were trying to get him by the ear. But we're already sort of in a sort of quiet Cold War situation with Iran anyway. And then Iran is getting caught trying to assassinate Trump. It's not going to help, is it? It's certainly not going to help. So anybody with ties to the Iranian government is going to have a difficult time. Anybody with ties to the Iranian military is going to have a difficult time. And I think background checking in general for Iranians is going to increase, or anyone who's traveled to Iran or any of that area. It's going to get more difficult, right? So. So will your number have a chance? Possibly, but will you have extensive delays? Yeah, you absolutely will. Particularly if there's any males on your application, like adult males. Why Tunisia has a small approval rate compared to Algeria and Morocco? Last year, 91 were accepted from Tunisia, where Morocco 4469 and Algeria 5526. Okay, so it's not a approval rate. You're talking about selectee rate. The number of people selected is exactly proportional to the number of people that enter. Okay, it's as simple as that. If less people enter, you'll have less winners. That's as simple as that. I don't know that your number is correct. Is that correct? Tunisia was only 91? Don't know. Let's see. Visa bulletin. So I'll look up the visa bulletin from September of last year just to see if that's really correct. Let's have a look at that. September, Africa, where are we? Africa, Tunisia, where are you? 96. So there were 96 this year. Perhaps you're talking about last year's number, but for DV25, there are 96 from Tunisia, which would be about 50 families, right? But it's exactly related to the number of entries. There's nothing funny going on. It's exactly that, okay? And in fact, the chance of selection for a Tunisian is probably higher than Algerian or Moroccan. And I've done videos that explain that point, but just for now, you just have to accept what I just said, really. Okay, thank you, Dante. Joe, congratulations. Yeah. Will Trump ban the lottery in 2025? So yeah, as we've just spent an hour and a bit discussing, I don't think he's going to ban it immediately. I think he's going to make life difficult for DV lottery people, possibly from certain countries There may be a travel ban implemented. There may be a total shutdown of immigration, although I find that hard to believe. But so, total ban of entries would be at one end of the scale. Next line down would be a travel ban on certain countries because those countries represent too big a risk. Next sort of thing down from that would be sort of enhanced vetting or, sort of increased screening, which slows the whole process down. And there could also be measures like just slowing everything down full stop. So there will be, and I think it's probably more likely there'll be interference with the program, DV lottery program, than cancellation. I think there will be interference for sure, but I don't think there'll be cancellation of it. Dunlop, some of the same people who are now concerned about the DV lottery wanted Trump to win, talk about rooting against your own interests. I know. I saw this news article about this guy, 66-year-old man, whose family brought him here from Canada when he was 2 years old. But for one reason or another, his family never really proved that even though he was born outside of the country, his father was an American citizen. So he should have done something. His family should have done something to gain him citizenship. They didn't do that. And so here's a 66-year-old Trump supporter who is now trying to claim Social Security benefits and can't because he's not actually a legal immigrant. He's not actually a legal citizen of the USA. And now under the rules that this guy himself was voting for, he should be deported, which is the classic example of what you're just talking about, rooting against your own interests, just the stupidity of some folks. The Latino vote increased for Trump, like unbelievable. Should green card holders abstain from traveling outside the USA? If you're a green card holder, you're an LPR, a lawful permanent resident, you are pretty much immune from the problems. There was an immediate, in the very early days of the first administration, Trump administration, there was an airport ban. Like literally they were just stopping people at the airport. So for the first couple of days, there were people literally arriving on planes and being turned away at the airport or held at the airport, even though they were green card holders. That was very quickly dealt with by lawyers. There were lawyers who rushed to the airports, quite literally, to help people who were being held up because of the various bans. And the courts decided on behalf of the green card holders that they should be allowed to re-enter. There were various other things as well. There was a thing about bona fide relationships, which was, people that were coming here for reuniting with their family members. If they could prove that they had a close family member, those people were also exempted from some of the bans. So we'll have to wait and see, but I think it's a very, very safe bet that if you're a green card holder, you should be fine. Just be careful about the absences, right? Keep the absences. I think from now on, we're probably going to have to talk about absences should be kept under 6 months, which is what the lawyers have always recommended. But the government publishes information, which I've used in the past, saying absences can be up to 12 months. But I think now, with the Trump administration, if you're a green card holder, keep the absences below 6 months, okay? DV25 case number AF22K, do I have any chance with Trump? Possibly. It's difficult to say, Samir, because I don't know what country you're from or, it's too hard to say, but do watch the rest of the video, right? Roberto, just as a suggestion, for the next meetings with Jesse, you should do some sort of survey amongst the selectees and choose 4 to 5 questions that you don't have a precise answer for and ask Jess. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Roberto. If I'd have had a bit more chance to prepare for this, I probably should have done such a thing, and I will do for next time. Thank you for mentioning. Doesn't rainy? No, I've already answered that one. DV25 AF14K. KCC mentioned my case. DS is currently in process. I'm based in Paris Embassy, and I submitted the DS on 6th of May. When will I get the 2NL? I can't say when you'll get the 2NL. For whatever reason, your case has taken longer to process than most cases. That does happen. It's not completely unusual. There are case numbers higher than yours that have been processed. There are cases after yours that were submitted after yours that have been processed, but for whatever reason, your case took a little bit longer than other cases. So you just have to be patient and wait for that to happen. Okay. When Trump takes office, will he just go after the immigration or the inflation or the other promises made by him? What will be his main concern first when he takes office first? The inflation rate is already under control. The economy is already strong. The stock market and shares and mutual funds, all those sort of things have never been stronger. We're already drilling and producing more oil than has ever been produced before. Under the Biden administration, the oil production numbers are higher than at any time in the Trump administration or any administration ever before, right? Biden has produced, if you want to talk about presidents producing oil, for example, Biden has produced more oil than the Trump administration or any other administration ever has done, right? We are more energy independent today under the Biden administration than ever have been before. That is largely because of the green energy policies that went back as far as Clinton. And when you're producing more green energy through solar and wind and that sort of thing, it means that we are freeing up some of our natural reserves, which we then export. And so we are now more energy independent. If you look at all energy as a basket, we're more energy independent than we have ever been before. These are claims that Trump has made. Trump has said the inflation is too high right now. It's already dealt with. Trump has claimed that the economy is crashed and is crashing. It's already a good economy. He claimed that his policy of drill baby drill, which is producing more oil, will make eggs cost like pennies on the dollar. And other stupid things he said. We're already drilling more oil. We're already producing more energy. So the reality is, from an economic point of view, all Trump has to do is not F it up because it's already working well, right? He doesn't have to do anything, really, to be able to stand back and claim that he's doing a fantastic roaring economy. He doesn't have to do anything. So what will he instead do? He'll go after mainly illegal immigration. He'll try and put tariffs on, and might fiddle around with the tax regime. But generally speaking, things like, if you suddenly deport a bunch of people, not only does it cost a lot of money to deport someone, but you also strip that person out of our economy, and then who's going to take that job? Because immigrants, both legal and illegal, tend to do the harder, lower paying jobs to start with, right? That's part of the reality. If you come to this country, you're probably not going to come in at the highest paying job unless you've got significantly higher skills. But generally, many of the people that Trump has talked about deporting are doing jobs that are important to this economy and to this country. So if he suddenly deports, let's say, 10 million people, that's what Jesse was saying, it would crash the economy. In the same way, if he implements tariffs, Trump and his followers think that tariffs are a tax on another country, and therefore it increases our income somehow by getting tariffs from the other country. It doesn't work that way. Tariffs are paid in America by American countries and companies, and those companies pass on the increased costs to the consumers in this country. So tariffs will destroy the economy if he really did what he said he was going to do. Deportations would destroy the economy if he really did what he said he was going to do, right? Those things are a bad thing for him to touch, but he might try and touch them anyway. I don't know. On immigration, he'll look for ways to strengthen the border. The border, funnily enough, has been quite cleverly and tightly closed down by the Biden administration. Again, if you believe the right-wing rhetoric that you may have read, you will think I'm talking nutty speech right now, that I'm lying or whatever, but I'm not lying. That's the reality. They've already done some things that have made it significantly harder to come into the country at the southern border, and even harder for you to claim asylum. And asylum waiting times have gone massively high. So It'll be interesting to see what Trump does, because a lot of what he's been saying isn't what he'll actually do. So we have to wait and see what he does. Or if he does the things that he's been saying, then he's going to seriously screw up this country. I mean, I'm not joking. I mean, he would seriously screw up the country, and I don't think people around him will let him do it. But we'll have to wait and see. Okay. If someone registered for the 25 lottery and has a case number of 7,500, would there be any issues if they register again for the 2026 lottery? None at all. The DV 2026 entry period is closed now, so you can't still do it. But there is no harm in applying for a future lottery like DV 26 when you're a 25 winner. No harm at all. Okay. 22K Algiers. Do I have any chance? You asked earlier, Samir. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Sam, I'm asking you before my question about CN32K. Oh, he's talking to Sam. Do you Trump? I think Trump Muslim ban will return. If yes, his roles may take a period of months, or you think it'll be a quick turnaround? I think he will try and do something quickly, maybe for a limited number of countries. There could be some sort of ban, right? I think I've talked about that with Jesse on this call already, right? In a previous podcast, 4547 said he would give green cards to all F1 visa students that graduate. Can he do that? Not exactly. We already have a process that people that go through training, etc., can go on to, or education, can go on to get technical training in this country, and thereby gain a little bit of a legal foothold to stay in the country and possibly get green cards. Will he do something like that? I don't know. We'll have to see. That could be one of the horse trading policies that Jesse was referring to. If he wanted to do that, for example, if he wanted to say successful completion of an F1 degree course, giving you, let's say, a master's degree, right? Let's say he said, yeah, I want to reward everyone that gets a master's degree in the USA on an F1 visa. They followed all the rules. They've done well. They've passed their master's or PhD or whatever. We should give that person a green card so that we encourage them to stay and use those skills and education in the USA. Not a bad policy. And so he might say, okay, that's something good I want to do. And to pay for it, in terms of the budget of green cards, to pay for that, I want to take away the DV lottery. That's the skinny bill that Jesse would be talking about, where a trade-off is made between one and the other things. If he introduces a bill to just kill the DV lottery on its own for no reason, without anything being added in, then there's nothing of interest for people to vote on, and it's unlikely to pass. So he either reforms all immigration, which is incredibly difficult. I don't think the Trump administration want to do something incredibly difficult, or they start with those skinny bills and they sort of do a bit of horse trading, and then even then it will be argumentative, because there'll be some other senator whose pet project is this type of immigration, or there'll be pressure from Elon Musk who says, yeah, but we got to give a green card to every H-1B, because a lot of them work for Elon Musk, right? And so he'll want different things. So there will be pressure to put other things into a bill, and then the bill gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden it becomes unacceptable to too many people, and that's where bills die. That's how it doesn't work. When will the visa bulletin come out? Same as every month, between the 8th and the 15th, which means it's probably going to be coming out by Friday of next week. Does visa retrogression affect moving in 2026? I know what you're talking about. You're mixing some terms up there. If someone submit his or her DS-260 in October, can he or she receive the 2NL before January 20th, sir? Possibly. It would depend. It would depend in October. Possibly. I'd be surprised if that happened. It would probably have to be someone with a very low case number and an extremely good embassy, and it would depend when in October, right? Maybe the first few days of October that was submitted, and that's being cleared by now. That person would have to have been cleared already to get a January interview, right? The process, the DS-260, would have had to have been processed by now already. Okay. Do I think Afghanistan might be on Trump's green card ban list? Difficult to say. It's possible. It's possible. I would be sad to see that, but it could happen. I'm born E2 investor. Can they do another full-time job like medical residency training while on E2 visa? I don't know. I talk about DV lottery only, so I don't know about the E2 investor. UK born, yeah. How about Oceania region? So funnily enough, I was thinking about this morning. I was thinking of if there are wide-scale bans in place, who loses and who wins? And there are always losers and winners in every process, right? I think the interference with the process could affect everybody, but it's least likely to affect Oceania region, right? Oceania probably will benefit from these general bans. The countries or the regions that will be affected by the bans, travel bans, would be mainly Africa and Asia, right? EU will be mostly unaffected by the bans. There will be some areas within EU that could be banned, but generally it will be a lesser impact to EU. So EU could benefit from the freed up visas, mainly from Africa, and not taken by Asia, because Iran's going to have a difficult time, right? Let's be honest, that should be obvious to anybody at this point. Iran's going to have a difficult time for DV 2025, right? So EU probably is going to be the biggest beneficiary of the slowdown of visa issuance in Africa and Asia regions if these bans come into place. Just speculating here, but that's likely. Oceania would be another beneficiary of that new visa availability. There are quotas for each region, but if a region doesn't use all of its quota, then that quota can be given to the other regions. So, and that could happen. The other thing that would happen, by the way, is that the visa bulletin, as I mentioned, the visa bulletin will probably move faster under the Trump regime because there will be so many people who can't process. If there are bans in place, there will be a large number of people who can't process their cases. And that means that they'll move the visa bulletin a bit faster and to a higher number, more to the point. So we're more likely to see Africa going current, for example, under a Trump ban situation than the numbers being held back. I don't think we'll see a slowdown in the visa bulletin numbers. Okay. Okay. Well, let me just look for a couple of questions. Why is OC region interviews so slow this year? It's still at 500. Is actually not that low. If you look at previous years, it's not that low at all. And it's in line with expectations, in all honesty. If you think about the first 3 months of the year being a quarter of the 12 months, right? I only expect OC numbers to go completely without any of these impacts. OC would go up to about 2,000 plus or minus, give or take, 100 or 200 cases, case numbers, about 2,000. So they should move about 500 per quarter, and that's what they've done, right? So it's really not as slow as you think. It's not that bad. Okay. My parents are DV23 winners, and they are now living in the US thanks to you. I'm over 21, stayed in my country. Should I tell them to apply for a family visa? Oh, God, yes, please. They should file that now, right? If you are entitled to file it now. Go through the process right now if you're able to. You're over 21. What can they do? They can file for you, right? It's going to take a very long time, but at least get the filing in. It's not going to be a quick thing at all. It's going to take years. But I would say, they would be smart to file for you now. And I'm pleased to read that they benefited from DV23 and perhaps from my help. But yeah, please do get them to file for you as quickly as possible. Good luck with that. I observed that there are low playing rate this year. Trying to compare both confirmation number and last day playing of last year and this year. Will it has impact on high selection ratio. You're completely guessing all of that information. You could not have observed that there's a low playing rate this year because there's no public data about that. There was public data available about the number of people going to the website, and it wasn't particularly low. I did monitor that. I don't know if you even did that, but I did monitor that. It wasn't particularly low, so I don't think there's been a low entry rate. And the confirmation number and last day of playing, blah blah blah. None of that makes any sense. It's a random draw. It doesn't matter when you enter. It's nothing to do with when you enter or anything else. It's just a random draw. So is there going to be a high selection ratio? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But there are definitely multi-millions of people, probably 10 million plus entries, and they're only going to select 100,000 people, give or take 40,000, let's say. There's plenty of entries to select the winners, right? Is there any troubles that I may face in my case because I want to unlock in January to add my spouse after our legal marriage? My case number is AF44K Nairobi. Wow. So you're from Kenya. It's not likely to be impacted by a travel ban, but I can't be 100% certain. Your case number is not that low, so you're not going to be able to do much. But I do wish that you had got married a bit earlier, to be honest with you. I think you would have been smart to marry faster. But the moment, you should unlock your case prior to your wedding. I hope you understand this. So, you want to unlock before you get married, and the day after your wedding night, right? That's the only time I'm going to give you, right? You take your wedding night, you do all the wonderful things, celebrate your wedding ceremony and everything else, and then the very next day, you submit your DS-260 as a married person. You unlock your own DS-260, you add your spouse on the DS-260, you create a DS-260 for your new spouse. All of that should be ready to go the very next day after the wedding. I don't give a damn that you're going to Mauritius or on a holiday somewhere. Make sure you have something in place to get your DS-260 resubmitted as a married couple the very next day. And if you have an opportunity or a way of bringing the legal marriage part of your wedding forward, like if you can get legally married before the public ceremony or whatever, then do that and submit based on the legal marriage, right? Hi, Simon. Biden administration brings lots of Mexicans in and taking most social benefits. Would it not be an issue, according to you as a US citizen? Want to listen your take on this. So don't be a moron is what I would say. Like, really, you have to understand that most people are being manipulated, and I think that those people are frankly moronic. They're being manipulated by the right to believe things like you've just stated, right? That the Biden administration brings a lot of Mexicans in. What do you mean the Biden administration brings a lot of Mexicans in? You think there are Biden buses heading to Tijuana, sort of gathering up Mexicans and shipping them in? That sort of ridiculous statement is something I would expect from Newsmax or AON or Fox News, and it's moronic. There's no other way of putting it. It's moronic. That's not what's happening, right? Mexicans are coming in through the border, but it's not that the Biden administration is bringing them in. Don't be a moron, please. And then taking most social benefits. That's not true. They're not entitled to go claim social benefits, as you say. And, you're just creating up, you're just repeating nonsense you've heard on right-wing media. It's just nonsense, frankly. Asylum seekers, who are not coming from Mexico, by the way, asylum seekers are entitled to come into this country. And asylum is an international law based on a law created in 1951, international law, right? Asylum is an internationally legally accepted process. And so when someone arrives in this country, if they have a credible fear of persecution, fear for their lives and that sort of thing, not economic distress, not I'm very poor in my country, I want to live in a rich country. No, that's not, you can't claim asylum based on that. But if you have a credible fear, you're entitled to seek asylum. When you are allowed to enter to claim asylum, what should happen is that there should be plenty of immigration judges and immigration advocates ready to help you through that process and adjudicate your process quickly. And then if you're not entitled to asylum, you should be deported, right? And that process should take months. But currently it's taking years. And that's the difficult thing. We don't really have a Mexicans coming from the Biden administration problem, as you're suggesting. What we have is a lot of people taking advantage of the fact that the previous administrations, including the Biden administration, have not been able to increase the number of people ready to process asylum seekers, so that now it takes between, I think, 6 and 8 years to process an asylum case. So during that 6 to 8 years, you're entitled to wait in America, and you have an EAD card, and you're able to work and all those sort of things. And so for some people, they make the claim knowing that they're going to be rejected in the end, but that's 8 years away. And in those 8 years, they're going to make as much money as they can. They're going to save as much money as they can. And if it all comes crashing down at the end of 8 years, so be it. They'll have made enough money to live comfortably forever after in their own home countries. So how do you fix that? You fix that by creating more immigration judges and doing everything you can to speed up that immigration process and reduce the backlog, which went from about 2 million backlog cases to 3.5 million backlog cases in just about an 18-month time period. So, we've only got 700 immigration judges in this country. That's the problem. So if these morons in government that will be in government from January 20th don't address that problem, then asylum will continue to be a magnet for people to come in and, abuse that privilege or that right, I should say, whilst other people are running seriously for their lives. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. There are people coming into this country who need asylum, and those people should be given a fair and just asylum process. It's simple, really, but the right wing have apparently convinced 74 million people in this country that there's a ton of illegal immigrants running around the country murdering people. Honestly, they've said there's something like 20 million people coming in. So what should happen is I should open my front door now, and I should see about 500 illegal immigrants running around killing citizens outside my front door. Because if there's 20 million people that have come in, that's sort of 8% of the population of the USA. That's a huge number of people. I should see thousands of immigrants, illegal immigrants, in my city. I don't see any. So So please don't believe this right-wing bullshit. Don't be a moron. Try and do your own research to try and understand why is BritSimon calling me a moron? Well, it's because you've listened to morons, and only a moron would do that. There you go. It's like, oh dear. Osman says, I have a family, but my status is single. Then I coming USA lottery alone. How to start their case? What? I have a family, but my status is single. Oh, are you telling me, Osman, that you lied on your application and committed immigration fraud? So did you enter as a single person when actually you're married and you have children? I'm afraid you can never fix that. And I've told you and I've told others many, many times, don't tell those lies on the DV lottery process. I don't know. I can't quite understand your comment here. But if that's what you're telling me, Osman, then I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do to help, because if you lie on that thing, you're screwed, basically. Charlotte, do you know UK winners' numbers from DV25? No, we still don't know. They've never corrected that visa bulletin. We don't know. I have no way to prove it until they actually start processing cases, and we'll be able to look at the numbers in London. But there could be a French person processing in London Embassy. That doesn't mean that's an English person, right? But I do know that there are some UK winners. I just don't know how many. My sister is 19. She wanted to apply DV26 twice. one from her mother and second for separate entry. Is that okay? Or disqualified in both entries? No. So a 19-year-old can have their own DV lottery entry in their own right. They can also be the derivative of the parents who enter, right? So mum and dad can both enter individually. Both of those would list the 19-year-old child, and the 19-year-old would also apply for themselves. So one person would be mentioned on 3 entries. Only one of those entries is their own entry, and the other 2 they're derivatives of. Okay. Okay. Simon, thanks for your amazing work. You're welcome. My wife was selected in DV25, Europe case 21K. When can we expect an interview? Second question about dual citizenship. Can you submit 2 applications for DV? Okay. First question, when can you expect the interview? I don't know. It depends on when you submitted your DS-260, which has to be fully processed before you can be scheduled. It also depends on your case number, which I know is 21K, and I don't know when that's going to become current, right? And then it also depends on your embassy, and I don't know which embassy you're at or how backlogged they are. I don't have any data for the backlogs. I'll only have more data in January. So you're asking me to guess something that is unguessable at the moment. So I'm sorry, I don't know. Your second question, if you have dual citizenships, can you submit 2 applications for DV? No. Because the DV lottery process is based on place of birth. You can only have 1 application because you can only be born 1 time. I don't know of anybody that was born twice. I don't even want to go into how that would work. But no, you're born in 1 place, right? And so you're entitled to enter from that place. As an alternative, you can switch your application to being charged to your spouse's country of birth. That's one way, but then you switched. You still only allow 1 entry. And it has nothing to do with citizenship. If you've got multiple citizenships, let's say you're a citizen of France and also Morocco, right? You couldn't have 2 entries, based on those 2 citizenships. They would simply say, okay, where were you born? Morocco, France, or some other country? Tell us where you're born, and that's the place you're eligible to charge from in normal circumstances. That's it. Okay. How do you see a country like Tanzania being affected? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens about the bans. Everything we've said in this video today, by the way, with Jesse, is speculative. We can't know what's going to happen. We're just trying to sort of prepare for what could happen. That's just the process we're going through. And I'm very grateful that Jesse took some of his Sunday to spend some time to actually go through that. And he reached out to me the other day because he's concerned for DV25 people and how they'll be affected. So, incredibly kind man to even think about that. Thank you. Thank you, Jesse. But yeah, brilliant. Lyndon, sorry I'm late. Applied for DV26. What's the word on Trump administration? We don't know yet. Lyndon, you'll have to go back and watch some of the video. Okay, let me just skim down here, see if there's an interesting question. Oh dear. I found out from research, when people start questions like that, I'm usually a little nervous. But I recently, that 47 is determined to cancel the DV program. By the way, to some others that won't know, Trump will be the 47th president of the USA. He was also the 45th, right? So he's sometimes referred to as 45 or 47, as he'll now be referred to, right? So it's Trump he's talking about. Determined to cancel the DV program in part because of Saifullah's Saipov attack in Lower Manhattan in October 2017. Yeah, that was when Trump learned there was such a thing as DV lottery, and instantly said he wanted to close down the lottery process, the DV lottery. There's only been ever 2 attacks by DV lottery winners, and if you think about it, just think about it, right? If you were a terrorist organization sitting wherever you wanted and you wanted to attack America, right? Would you, A, apply for the DV lottery in October, wait until, this is option A, right? Wait until May, see if all of your terrorists got selected. Maybe you apply for 100 terrorists because you want to be sure that at least one of them gets in, right? So you wait until May, then you wait patiently until your number becomes current, and then you go through all the background screenings, and you go through the interview, and eventually you get your green card. So then you can come into America and attack America, right? That's option A. Or option B is get on a plane with a non-immigrant visa, get some sort of visa, or enter through the southern border or the northern border or anywhere else, right? And do that tomorrow. So do you A, wait 2 years and gamble by having lots of people there, or do you B, enter tomorrow with a simple visa, or just try and cross? Like, why do they think DV Lottery and this Saipov's case or whatever? Why do you think that? Why would they think that that's to do with DV Lottery being a bad program? It's nothing to do with it. Of course, terrorism doesn't go through the DV Lottery process. That's not what they do, right? Honestly, the stupidity of that sort of comment, it needs to be called out how stupid that is, but whatever. And I'm not blaming you. I mean, I'm retracing my Africa. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying it's an incredibly daft thing, right? That people would think that the DV Lottery is how terrorists are coming to the country. It's just silly. Okay. I could probably keep answering questions all afternoon, but I don't have I don't have the time, and it's almost 2 hours now. My throat is starting to give out, so I think I'm going to call it a day. I do appreciate you spending some time with me today. I'm hoping that the session with Jesse was helpful, perhaps allayed some fears, perhaps given you an idea of what you should do. Try and think back to what he was suggesting. Don't delay if you're given a visa. Maybe consider adjustment of status. If we, do go prepared to any interview with every piece of documentation you can, and be prepared to fight for your right. If you can get an interview, hopefully things will work out for you. But unfortunately, there is no guarantee that you'll ever get an interview. You're not entitled to an interview. It's not a right you have through selection in the lottery. You don't have a right to a green card. This thing is a privilege, and hopefully the privilege won't be taken away. All right, everybody, thanks for joining me today. If I didn't get to your question and you still would like to ask the question, please go to BritSimonSays.com and answer the question there. And if you have a question for Jesse, you can get him at blesslitigation.com. Okay? Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining with me today. All right, bye-bye.